Scpa Elementz. Mercury. Mercury is the only metal to be a liquid. Therefore, it was given its name Quicksilver because it forms little silver balls when placed on a flat surface. It's extremely dense, 13.5 grams per centimeter squared. It's so dense that even bricks will float on top of it. That's really dense. It was given its name from the Roman god because of his speed and mobility. It was also given its name from the planet, which is from the Roman god, and its symbol derived from it was just the only element that took a symbol from a planet. Now, in ancient culture, we didn't know as much about how toxic elements were, therefore, we did some crazy things with them. The Romans and Egyptians used them for makeup and cosmetics, while the Greeks used them for medicine. But what's even worse, the Chinese thought that if they consumed mercury, they would be immortal. However, they accomplished exactly what they did not want to accomplish, which they soon realized, well, it killed them. Now, to extract mercury, they take this compound, cinnabar, which is mercury and sulfur, and with applied heat, it will react with the oxygen, and sulfur and oxygen will combine, leaving the pure mercury. It is also mercury also helps out in the extraction of another element, silver. It's the Petio process. When you combine salt, water, mercury, and crushed up silver, then the silver, after being let out to sit and dry for a long time, it will become extracted. And this process was actually, it allowed the Americas to become the primary producer of silver. It ended the mid-17th century silver crisis and allowed for silver to be mined for significantly cheaper. So it played a role in another element's extraction as well. Now, there's this theory that rotating mercury in a gyroscope will create anti-gravity. Now, how is this possible? In ancient Indian culture, there's these things called vimanas, where people believe that in the bottom there's this mercury rotating in this gyroscope, which would disrupt the magnetic field and would take out 90% of gravity. However, due to the extreme amount of energy this uses, it's nearly impossible to do this above land. However, underwater, it's theoretically possible to be able to take a submarine and drive it underwater and silently, which is pretty cool. And in World War II, there was this thing called the Nazi bell. No one really knew what it was. There was this bell-shaped, triangular-looking thing, and looked familiar maybe. And Hitler was creating this, and it disappeared after the war. But some people think it was a time-traveling machine. Some people think it was the vimanas of ancient Indian culture. Maybe Hitler was onto something. So the last time you ate fish, did you really think what was in them? Fish contained some mercury inside the tissue, the muscle tissue. So when you consume fish, you're actually consuming some mercury. But when consumed in small amounts, it doesn't really do any harm. And in Japan, there is actually a disease that there's actually a name for this. And so many people would get sick because of this mercury poisoning. But when you consume in small amounts, it's not as bad. However, as you go up the food chain, the smaller fish on the bottom, larger fish such as sharks up on top, since these sharks and predators are consuming these small fish on the bottom, they have more mercury in them, so by eating these you have to be more careful because you don't want to die from the mercury poisoning. Also, The artist Alexander Calder had a great example of using science and art. He created a fountain that flooded Mercury in Paris in 1937. It was a great way to incorporate science and art, and it was a great example. Now, speaking of weird reactions of mercury, look at this. This is the decomposition of mercury thiocyanate. Look, it goes from a simple powder that's placed there, and then when you burn it, it grows into this weird substance. Mercury is so fascinating, and there's so many interesting things about it, and it's wonderful.